The winter of 1349 arrived without mercy. Snow fell for 7 days without pause, smothering the stone roads and wooden rooftops alike. The plague had already emptied half the village before the cold finished the rest. Ravens stood where children once played, and in the silent hours between dusk and dawn, something else moved through the trees beyond the fields. My name is Thomas of Brindlewick. I was once a miller's son. Now I am one of the last. The priest vanished first. Father Odrin had gone to bless the eastern farms after rumors spread that cattle were dying without wounds. He never returned. We found his lantern 2 days later, still unbroken, hanging from a branch deep in the frost-bitten woods. No footprints, no blood, only the lantern, gently swaying as if someone had just passed. The villagers whispered of wolves. Others said bandits. The older ones said nothing at all. Silence in those days meant you were afraid to name what you saw. Then the bell began to ring at night. Our church bell had been cracked since before my birth. It hadn't rung properly in decades. But 3 nights after the priest vanished, it rang exactly once, slow, deep, and hollow, just before midnight. No one dared to answer it. On the 4th night, the ringing returned, again only one toll. This time I saw movement in the graveyard, a shape standing among the tilted wooden crosses, tall, too thin, unmoving. The cold was so sharp it burned my lungs, yet sweat crawled down my spine. By morning, old Marta was gone. Her door stood open, her stew still warm, no tracks in the snow. Panic arrived with the sunrise. Families barricaded their doors with furniture. Firewood ran low, food ran lower. The bell rang each night, claiming one more soul, always without sound of struggle, always without trace. By the 7th disappearance, the villagers stopped praying. That was when I decided to follow the bell. On the 8th night, I wrapped myself in my father's old cloak and took the rusted sickle from the mill. The trees groaned as the wind passed through them like breath through broken teeth. When the bell rang, I moved. It led me not to the church, but past it, into the woods. The sound pulled me through frozen underbrush, deeper than any hunter dared go. The trees grew twisted here, their branches knotted like skeletal hands. The moonlight thinned until the forest swallowed it whole. Then I saw the door. It stood alone between 2 dead oaks, an upright wooden doorframe with no wall, no house, no path leading to it, and behind it, darkness deeper than the night itself. The bell rung again, directly behind that door. Something stepped forward. At first I thought it was a man. Then I saw its legs bent the wrong way. Its arms hung too long. Its face was human only in memory. "You ring for the dead?" I whispered. Its mouth opened wider than it should have been able to. "The dead ring for me." Before I could run, hands seized my cloak from behind. The villagers, 5 of them, had followed me in silence. Desperation had made them brave or foolish. The creature moved, not fast, not slow, simply unavoidable. It passed through them like cold fog through fire. Flesh shriveled, breath vanished, bones fell in 6 lifeless heaps before a single scream could form. Then it turned back to me. "You walk the edge, that is why you still breathe." I fell to my knees, the sickle clattering uselessly into the frost. "What are you?" I asked. I am what comes when forgetting is complete. The ground behind the door pulsed like a living heart. Faces pressed against the dark surface, dozens of them, the missing, the taken, trapped in endless silence. You feed on us, I said. No, I collect what is already abandoned. With that, it stepped backward through the door. The darkness closed like still water. The bell never rang again. By spring, only 3 of us remained in Brindlewick. We burned the church. We buried no one. There were no bodies left to bury. And sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, I still hear the bell far beneath the earth, ringing for a village the world has already forgotten.
The spring thaw did not bring relief. It brought stench. When the snow melted, it revealed what winter had hidden: collapsed roofs, bloated livestock, and the shallow dirt where we had pretended graves still counted as burial. Crows ruled the sky now. They had learned there would be no stones thrown, no shouts to scare them off. Brindlewick was no longer a village. It was a wound. Only 3 of us remained: myself, Elric, the blacksmith's apprentice, and Sister Maud, the last nun from the abbey beyond the river. The others had fled in the early weeks after the bell stopped ringing. They left in silence, afraid that noise itself might summon what had taken the rest. But running did not save them. 2 weeks after their escape, we found their coats tangled in the branches along the southern road. No blood, no bones, just frozen cloth clawing at the wind. Maud said nothing when she saw it. She hadn't spoken much since the night at the door in the woods. At night, Elric drank until his hands shook. During the day, he hammered iron he had no orders for, hinges for doors that would never close again, locks for homes no one would return to. I carved markers into dead trees for the names that no longer had bodies. And still, beneath everything, the waiting. The first dream came on the 13th night after the bell fell silent. I stood in the forest again, before the door, but now it was open. Inside was not darkness, but Brindlewick, whole, untouched, alive. Children ran through clean streets. Smoke rose from warm hearths. My father stood at the mill wheel, younger than I remembered. He turned, and his face was wrong. Eyeless, smooth, featureless. You left us, he said, without a mouth. I woke screaming. From that night on, the dream spread. Elric began muttering in his sleep, forging invisible metal with twitching fingers. Maud began waking with dirt beneath her nails, as if she had been digging while dreaming. And always, always, the door appeared in the dreams, sometimes near, sometimes distant, sometimes dripping shadow like tar from its frame. On the 17th night, Maud finally spoke. "It is not finished," she said, staring into the fire. "It never takes everything at once." Elric laughed sharply. "There's nothing left to take." Maud turned to him. "That is when it takes the most." The next day, the river ran black. Not with rot, not with blood, with shadow. It moved against the current, thick as ink. Fish surfaced dead within seconds of touching it. The water reflected no sky, no light, only depth where depth should not exist. We stood at the riverbank in stunned silence. "The door is opening wider," Maud whispered. That night, the sky carried no stars. The darkness felt pressed against our skin, heavy and breathing. I took my sickle and sat by the mill door until my muscles locked with cold. Just before midnight, footsteps sounded in the snow, slow, measured, unafraid. A figure emerged from the tree line. It wore the face of Elric, but its eyes were hollow pits, and its shadow dragged in the wrong direction. The real Elric stood frozen beside me, staring at his own walking corpse. The double spoke in his voice. "You forged the hands that built the door." Elric staggered backward. "I never. You shaped the iron that bound it." The creature stepped closer. The air around it warped, bending frost into long black veins on the ground. "You were paid in silence." Elric screamed. The door appeared behind the creature, tearing itself open from the air like a wound ripping through skin. The real Elric tried to run. The false Elric took his wrist. There was no struggle, no blood. One moment Elric existed, the next he did not. Only his apron remained, frozen mid-fall. The door sealed. Maud collapsed to her knees. "The sins were scattered between us," she sobbed. "Now they are being reclaimed." I understood then. The priest's secret blessings, the forged metal sent beyond the valley, the abbey's hidden rituals. The door had not been summoned by one crime. It had been built by many. "You helped them," I said to Maud. Her eyes were empty. "We all did." That night, the forest moved closer. Trees leaned inward, branches bent like listening ears. The distance between shadows shortened. By dawn, Maud was gone. Her footprints led straight toward the woods and stopped before the door. The following night it came for me, not as a beast, not as a ghost, but as memory. My father stood in the mill doorway, flesh whole, eyes kind. "You hid the grain," he said, gently. "You watched them starve." The mill creaked behind him. "You let the bread rot to save yourself." The door opened inside the mill, and I understood. It was not hunting bodies. It was harvesting truth. I ran, through snow, through roots, through fear that tore the breath from my lungs. The forest twisted around me, paths rewriting themselves with each step. The sound of the door followed, not ringing, not calling, simply existing. Then the cliff, the old quarry drop where the stone had once been cut for the church, now an open mouth waiting to close. Behind me, the ground split. The door rose from the earth itself. "If you fall, you vanish forgotten. If I return, I belong to you. Forgetting is mercy." I stepped backward and fell.
Darkness swallowed the fall. Not the clean darkness of closed eyes, but a thick, pressing black that had weight and temperature. I fell through it like a stone through oil. Sound died first, then direction. Then even the feeling of falling began to unravel. And then I struck water. Freezing, crushing. It slammed the breath from my chest and folded me in on myself. I thrashed blindly, limbs colliding with unseen currents. Above me, no surface shimmered. Below, no depth revealed itself. The water was endless and lightless. My lungs burned. Just as the last of my strength broke, hands seized my shoulders. Not the cold grip of the door's shadow. Human hands. I was dragged upward into tearing cold air and thrown onto frozen stone, coughing black water that stained the snow around me like ink. For several heartbeats, the world was only pain and breath. Then a voice, cracked with exhaustion. "Don't move." I forced my eyes open. Maud knelt beside me, alive. Her habit was torn. Her hair had come loose from beneath her veil, streaked with frost and dirt. Blood crusted along her temple, but her eyes were sharp, terrified, yet burning with purpose. "You fell through," she said. "It almost kept you." I tried to speak. Only a rasp came out. She pulled me upright and pressed something warm against my hands. A flask. Bitter liquid burned down my throat, dragging heat back into my limbs like stolen fire. "Where are we?" I asked. "Between," she answered. The forest existed here, but wrong. The trees were stretched too tall, their trunks bending as though under invisible weight. The sky was not sky, but a dim, colorless ceiling that seemed to pulse faintly, as if something vast were breathing above it. And everywhere, doors. Some stood alone. Some were embedded into tree trunks. Others lay flat in the soil like buried coffins waiting to be opened. Some were rotted. Some were carved with symbols that hurt to look at. Behind many of them, I could hear sound. Crying, whispers, prayer, laughter from throats that had long forgotten air. "It's feeding ground," Maud said. "Not the world, not the end. The place it grows." I staggered to my feet. "You let it take you." She nodded. "To learn its roots." A door near us trembled. From behind it came slow knocking. 3 deliberate taps. Maud grabbed my arm. "Do not answer any sound that knows your name." The knocking stopped. Silence stretched so tight it rang. Then the door rippled, and Elric stepped out, or what wore Elric's shape now. His face was half correctly formed, half sagging into unfinished shadow, like a drawing abandoned midway. His mouth moved in jerks, as though words were being pushed through him from somewhere deeper. "Thomas," it said. My knees nearly gave out. Maud lifted a small iron blade, etched with symbols I did not recognize. "You no longer belong to it," she said. "Go back." The thing that was Elric smiled. "You built my hands." It lunged. The blade sank into shadow where a heart should have been. The creature howled, not in pain, but in outrage, as if reality itself had been offended. The sound boomed across the forest, and every door shuddered in answer. The Elric thing folded inward, collapsing into itself, as though pulled through a hole too small to contain it. And it was gone. Maud fell to one knee, shaking. "It cannot be killed here," she said. "Only delayed." The air thickened. Far above the pulsing ceiling, something shifted. A massive pressure rolled across the forest. Doors began to open on their own. Voices spilled out. Entire lives screaming at once. Maud seized my wrist. "It knows you escaped. It will reshape a path to claim you properly." "Then take me back," I said. Her grip tightened. "There is no back. Only deeper in or erased." Another door opened ahead of us. This one bled light. Not warm light, not holy light. A pale, sterile glow that stripped shadow from objects and left them hollow and thin. Maud hesitated. "Beyond that is the first binding, the place where it was stitched to the world." "What stitched it?" I asked. She met my eyes. "People." The light intensified. From inside it came the sound of chanting. Not human, not entirely other. Maud stepped forward. The ground beneath me convulsed. A crack tore open at my feet, vomited black mist, and from it rose the door. Not behind me, not before me, around me. It formed in a slow unfolding circle, enclosing me within its frame like ribs growing inward. The voice spread through the world. "You run toward truth only when forgetting fails." The forest bowed. Maud screamed my name. The door closed, not with sound, but with decision. darkness rushed in like a tide returning to claim a shore. The choking black pressed against my mouth, my eyes, my ears. Memory itself began to thin at the edges. Faces slipped, names unraveled. My father's voice faded mid-word. The mill's creak vanished. Brindlewick, gone. Only one thing remained unbroken: fear. And within that fear, something else kindled. Not hope, defiance. I drove the sickle into the door. Not into wood, into absence. The blade met resistance with a shriek that tore through the void like tearing cloth. The darkness recoiled. The door convulsed, splitting along a jagged seam. Through the wound poured sound. Wind. Cold. Maud's voice. "Thomas! Now!" I forced myself through the tearing gap as the void collapsed inward, grasping at my spine, my breath, my past. Hands caught me, pulled. The world snapped. We tumbled onto frozen ground beneath a sky once more filled with dead stars. The door shrieked behind us. Not in anger, in hunger. And it was still not finished.
The frozen ground scraped my palms raw as Maud dragged me forward. Behind us, the door thrashed within the split it had torn into the world, its edges folding and unfolding like something breathing through broken ribs. Shadow leaked from it in slow, searching tendrils, tasting the air. "Don't look back," Maud hissed. I didn't need the warning. The cold ahead was clean. The cold behind us was alive. We ran. Branches tore at our faces as the forest reshaped itself in our wake. Paths that had never existed opened just long enough for our feet, then sealed into snarled roots the moment we passed. The sky above us pulsed faintly, as though the stars were trapped beneath ice, struggling to be seen. The door screamed again. Not a sound exactly, more like pressure inside the skull, bending thought itself. With every step, memories trembled. My father's face flickered. Elric's laugh fractured into wrong notes. Even Maud's name wavered on my tongue. "Where are we going?" I gasped. "To where it can't forget who bound it," she answered. We burst from the trees into a wide hollow carved into the earth like an ancient wound. Stone foundations jutted from the ground in broken rings, remains of something that had existed before Brindlewick, before even the church. At the center lay a pit. Not a quarry, a shaft. Perfectly circular, its interior smoothed by hands that had never intended it to be climbed out of. Chains lined the rim, black with age, each link carved with symbols matching the blade Maud carried. "This is where they anchored the first door, where it learned how to stay," she said. The ground lurched. The forest behind us began to fold inward, trees sinking into shadow as though the earth itself were being rewritten. Maud pushed the blade into my hands. "If it takes me, you finish what they began." I don't even know what finish means. She met my gaze with an expression too calm for the end of the world. "It means choosing what remembers us." The earth split again. The door rose from nothing just beyond the hollow, its surface rippling as if something immense were trying to force itself through all at once. The air grew thick with the sound of pleading, hundreds of voices layered on top of one another, each begging in a different language, a different lifetime. Maud stepped forward. The shadow surged. It did not strike her directly. It erased the space between them. One moment she was there, the next, only her scream remained, caught mid-breath, stretched thin, then devoured. I staggered backward as cold surged through my chest like buried ice awakening.
The blade burned in my grip. The door expanded. The pit answered. A wind rose from the shaft, upward and violent, dragging loose ash, old bone dust, and forgotten prayer into the air. The chains rattled as one. From the darkness inside the pit, something moved. Not upward, outward. A shape coiled along the inner wall, too vast to measure by sight, its surface stitched with faces that opened and closed like wounds remembering how to speak. This was not the collector. This was the anchor, the thing they had bound to hold the door in place. The voice shuddered from the pit's depths. "You return what was stolen from me." The door's shadow surged toward the pit. The two forces collided not with impact, but with distortion. Space warped, sound folded into itself. I felt my body pulled in opposite directions at once, toward forgetting and toward binding. And in that tearing balance, something shifted. The blade vibrated in my hand. Symbols ignited along its edge. I understood without being taught. The door did not eat flesh. It consumed choice, and it was starving for mine. I stepped forward. The shadow rushed to meet me. Every lie I had hidden behind flooded the air between us. The grain I had concealed, the neighbors I had let starve, the way that I had told myself survival with innocence. The door drank it in, growing, widening, hungry. I raised the blade and stopped. Not out of fear, out of clarity. If I struck the door, I would cut it free from its hunger. If I struck the pit, the blade turned in my palm as if guided. I plunged it into the chain nearest the shaft. The metal shrieked. The symbols flared blinding white. The chain snapped. The wind from the pit howled. The massive shape below surged upward in violent response, faces stretching in silent agony as the binding tore free. The door recoiled. For the first time since Brindlewick vanished, it hesitated. I moved. Chain after chain broke beneath the blade's fury. The pit roared as the anchor twisted upward, no longer pinned to the world that had enslaved it. The ground split in widening fractures. The forest began sinking into the hollow as gravity itself bent toward the breach. The door screamed, not in hunger now, in panic. The last chain broke. The anchor erupted from the shaft in a storm of shadow and faces and ancient breath. The sky above split with a thunderous crack as the two forces collided fully for the first time. The impact flung me across the hollow. I struck stone. Air left my lungs in a single shattering exhale. Through blurred vision, I saw the door being dragged backward, pulled not by hands, but by the gravity of the thing it had once enslaved. Shadow tore. Light bled through. The door's edges cracked like breaking ice. And then it was gone. The forest crashed back into stillness. The pit sealed itself with a sound like a final breath. The wind died. Silence returned. Real silence. Not the waiting kind. The aftermath kind. I lay trembling, chest burning, staring at a sky that no longer pulsed. The stars were dead again, but they were honest. Slowly, shakily, I pushed myself upright. Maud was nowhere to be seen. Not erased, not taken. Simply absent. The blade lay broken beside me, its symbols dark. Around the hollow, the forest stood still for the first time since the bell rang. The door was not waiting anymore, but the world it had scarred would never close cleanly again. And neither would I. I pushed myself to my feet with hands that would not stop shaking. The hollow no longer breathed. The ground was cold, inert stone again. No whisper in the air, no pressure behind my eyes. Only the echo of what had ended and the ache of being the one left standing. I called Maud's name. The sound fell flat against the trees. No answer returned. I turned slowly, scanning the broken rim of the hollow, the sealed pit, the silent forest beyond. There were no footprints, no blood, no sign that she had ever stood beside me at all. It was as if the world, in sealing the breach, had smoothed her out of the moment. Not taken, not saved, spent. The cold returned then, not the living cold of the door, but the ordinary cold of a world that had resumed being cruel in familiar ways. My cloak was heavy with frost and ash. My head rang with exhaustion, so deep it felt like gravity pulling from the inside. I was alone. Again. I left the hollow at a stagger, not trusting my legs farther than a few steps at a time. The forest remained warped in places, trees bent at impossible angles, roots frozen in the middle of motion, as if caught trying to flee. But it no longer watched. By the time I reached the edge of what had once been Brindlewick's fields, dawn had bruised the horizon a dull gray. What remained of the village did not greet me as home. The mill stood crooked, its wheels split and frozen mid-turn. The church was nothing but a blackened skeleton of beams. The stone walls collapsed inward like ribs around an empty chest. Snow had drifted over everything, hiding the worst of it under a pale lie. I walked through the ruins as if through a graveyard without markers. My father's millstone lay cracked in two. I knelt beside it and pressed my forehead to the cold surface. No memory rose to meet me, only the certainty that something essential was missing from the shape of my path. Not stolen, released. I did not know which frightened me more. Days passed. I did not count them. I moved when hunger forced me, slept when my body failed. The forest no longer twisted itself to bar my path, but it offered no mercy either. Game was scarce. The river, once black, now ran clear again, though nothing lived in its depths. Sometimes at night, wind would move through broken door frames and make a sound disturbingly close to breathing. I did not answer it. On the seventh night after the hollow sealed, the dreams returned, but they were not the same. No door waited in the dark. No voices clawed through the black. Instead, I dreamed of faces I did not recognize, men and women in unfamiliar clothing, standing before fires made of white stone and light. They stared at me with expressions of sorrow I could not place. When I woke, I felt watched, not hunted, witnessed. On the 10th day, riders came. 3 of them, wrapped in gray cloaks, stitched with the same symbols that had once lived on Maud's blade. Their horses did not cast shadows. Their eyes held no fear of the dead village. They stopped at the edge of the ruins and looked at me as one might look at a tool left out in the rain. "The anchor is broken," he said. His voice carried no question. "Yes," I answered. "And the door, gone." He studied my face for a long moment. "Gone where?" "Where it belongs." The second rider dismounted. She circled me slowly, gaze sharp, searching for something under my skin. "It does not go where it belongs. It goes where it is sent." A silence opened between us. Then the third rider spoke, softly. It followed you. The weight of those words settled into my bones. You cut it free, and in so doing, you gave it direction. Now it is unbound from memory and bound to choice. Mine. I backed away until my shoulders met the broken frame of what had once been a door. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "To finish watching what you started." They turned their horses as though the matter were already decided. I did not follow. Not at first. Night fell again, and with it came the sound. Not a bell, not knocking. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, unafraid. They did not come from the forest. They came from within what remained of the village. From the mill. From the space where the wheel had once turned. I did not run. I stepped forward. The mill door, long warped and split, eased open without a touch. Darkness breathed from inside. Not the endless dark of the door, but a smaller one. A newborn, waiting to be named. And somewhere behind me, beyond the ruined church and the frozen river, I felt the world lean ever so slightly toward me, as if listening, as if deciding.
The mill swallowed my shadow as I crossed the threshold. Inside, the air was warmer than it should have been, not with fire heat, but with the faint warmth of movement, of something recently alive. The great wheel was still split, its broken paddles jutting at angles like ribs from an open chest. Water no longer turned it. Yet the scent of wet grain lingered, fresh enough to feel impossible. The footsteps sounded again, not behind me, above. I lifted my gaze to the loft. A figure stood there, outlined by a faint gray glow that did not fall from any candle. It did not fully touch the wooden boards beneath its feet, as if it were only being suggested to the room. It wore my father's shape, not imperfectly this time, exactly. My throat tightened so hard no sound escaped. "Tomas," it said. The voice was right, too right. It carried the weight of long labor, the tired gentleness he had used when I was small, when the mill's roar still frightened me. "You should not answer," I whispered to myself. It smiled. "You always did what you were told too late." I took one step forward, despite the warning pounding in my skull. "You are not him." It tilted its head. "I am what remains when the door forgets to finish eating." The gray light behind it pulsed softly. It continued. "I saw you try to save them, the way you watched the grain rot and told yourself it was patience." The mill creaked, not from wind, from weight. "You think cutting chains makes you clean." I raised the sickle. Its edge no longer glowed. It felt like ordinary iron again. The figure moved closer along the loft. Each step left the faintest smudge of shadow behind, like ash pressed into air. It used my father's shape, not imperfectly this time. Exactly. "You unbound one hunger, now smaller hungers have learned how to walk." The shadows along the mill walls thickened. They peeled away from corners, corners that no longer seemed attached to the geometry of the room. Shapes formed within them, half-built, twitching, learning where joints should be. I backed toward the door. It closed. Not slammed. Concluded. The latch slid into place by itself with a soft, final click. The thing wearing my father's face descended the ladder without climbing it. It simply drifted downward, as slow as falling dust. "I am not here to take you," it said. Hope tried to rise. It strangled halfway up my chest.
I am here to tell you that you are no longer free to be forgotten. The shadows moved. One surged toward me from the left. I swung the sickle. The blade cut through it with resistance, not like flesh, not like smoke, like slicing through wet cloth stretched too tight. The shadow screamed as it tore apart, the sound sharp and brief, like snapping wire. The others recoiled. The figure paused, studying me with new attention. You still carry the binding's echo. The pit did not close cleanly behind you. Another shadow rushed me from the right. I ducked beneath it, feeling cold rake across my hair like clawed frost. I stumbled backward, slamming into the mill's inner pillar. The room tilted. The shadows learned faster now. They no longer attacked as one. They circled, tested, adjusted their distance when I moved. Predators learning a wounded animal. "What do you want?" I shouted. The figure answered calmly. "Proof." A shadow leapt. I drove the sickle upward with both hands. The impact shuddered my arms to the bone. The shadow burst apart in a scatter of black fragments that evaporated before hitting the floor. Two more rushed in its place. One caught my leg, cold bit deep. For an instant, I could feel my name thinning again, sliding toward the edges of thought. I screamed, not in fear, but in refusal, and slammed the sickle into the shadow coiled around my calf. It shrieked and released me. The figure stepped back. Interest flickered across my father's stolen eyes. "Good," it said softly. "The door would have made you empty. This will make you sharp." The mill wall behind it began to split, not into a doorway, but into layers, as if the room itself were being unfolded page by page. Beyond the peeling layers I saw movement, other places, other thresholds, other hungers waiting to learn how to cross. The figure turned slightly, offering me a clear path past it. "Walk out, and they will follow where you lead, or stay, and they will learn this ground instead." The shadows tightened their circle. My breath came in ragged coils. Every choice left tracks now. I lunged for the door. It did not open. The figure sighed, almost sadly. Not that way. The floor beneath me softened, not sinking, unwriting. The grain dust, the boards, the stones beneath, all thinned at once, like memory washed with too much water. My foot plunged through into nothing. Cold seized me. I dropped, not falling forward, falling inward. The mill folded shut above me in silence. Darkness rushed up again, but this time it was narrow, rushing, compressing, like being pulled through the throat of the world. Sound twisted into distant echoes. Light collapsed into thin gray veins. Then I struck ground hard enough to rattle my teeth. Stone. Dry. Ancient. I lay gasping in blackness that was not entirely empty. The air smelled of dust and old metal. When I moved my hand, it brushed something cold and curved. A chain. Not broken. Waiting. Far away, through layers of stone and sealed memory, I thought I heard the mill wheel creak once, and under that sound, a bell. Not ringing, being built. The chain shifted when I inhaled. Not dragged, answered. The sound was a dry whisper of metal on stone, close enough that my bones vibrated with it. I forced myself not to move, not to give it rhythm. Darkness lay pressed against my eyes, thick but not blind. There was a faint grayness to it, the way deep water holds a suggestion of light. Something breathed on the other end of the chain. Slow. Measured, patient. My palm found the sickle by instinct. The handle was colder than the stone, slick with a thin film of frost that had no right to exist this far underground. I tightened my grip anyway. The echo of its edge was still in me. The pit had not taken that. Yet. A faint glow bloomed ahead, no brighter than moonlight strained through bone. It revealed a tunnel carved in uneven arcs, as if the rock had once been soft and remembered being shaped by hands that no longer existed. Symbols crawled over its walls, not etched, but pressed, like scars that had learned how to write. The chain led forward into that glow. It tightened. A single step pulled me before I meant to take one. My boots scraped against the stone, the sound obscene in the quiet. The breathing on the far end of the chain paused. Listened. I froze. The air thickened with attention. Then, one slow pull, not hard, not testing, inviting. I resisted. The chain did not move. Instead, the tunnel moved around me. The wall behind shifted with a low grinding sound as a seam appeared where no seam had been before. Stone peeled open like the turning of a massive, petrified page, revealing another corridor layered behind the first. Many paths, all wrong. The pull on the chain returned, firmer now. My feet slid despite my will. The stone beneath them had grown slick, as though recently exhaled. I bit back a shout and dug the sickle's point into the floor. It bit deep, sending a tremor up my arms. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the breathing on the chain changed. It drew in more air than any lung should hold. The chain snapped taut. I was wrenched forward so violently the sickle tore free in a spray of sparks. I crashed to my knees and slid across the stone, skinning my palms through the thin leather of my gloves. The tunnel rushed past in blurred gray bands. I slammed into something solid. Not wall. Leg. The impact knocked what little breath I had left from my chest. I sprawled onto my back, chest heaving, vision swimming. The faint glow wavered, then steadied. I was not alone. The thing standing over me wore the suggestion of a body. Its shape was wrong in subtle, stomach-turning ways. Too many joints in its limbs, a ribcage that rose and fell like a second, inverted set of lungs beneath the first. Its face was unfinished, not damaged, abandoned. Features drifted across it, as if searching for anchors, eye ridges sliding into new places, a mouth forming and dissolving again with wet, soundless effort. And yet, when it looked at me, it knew me. "You came back wrong," it said. The voice was many voices forced to share one throat. I scrambled backward, my shoulders striking stone. My hand found the sickle by blind luck. I brought it up between us, shaking so badly the blade sang faintly. "I never belonged here," I rasped. The thing tilted its unfinished head. "No one does. That is why we remain." It lifted one elongated hand. The chain slid through its fingers like a living thing. "You cut the deep hunger free. Now the shallow ones multiply. We were sealed to starve. You broke the lock between hungers." I tried to rise, The stone beneath me bowed, not cracked, yielded. The floor dipped just enough to steal my balance and send me back down hard. Pain flashed white through my spine. "You walk above," the thing continued, stepping closer, its joints folded in ways no living anatomy allowed. Its hand brushed my boot. Cold surged through me so violently my vision tunneled. For an instant, I tasted iron and snow and old wood all at once. My name wavered again at the edges of thought. I drove the sickle downward with everything I had left. The blade sank into its wrist. There was resistance, then release. Black thread sprayed from the wound, whipping away into smoke before they could touch me. The thing hissed like a sound plunged into cold water and recoiled violently. The chain went slack. I rolled to my side and staggered upright, barely keeping my feet. The tunnel had begun to change again. The symbols along the walls writhed, rearranging themselves as if reacting to injury. "You are marked now," the thing said, low and certain. "Even here, even broken, they will hear you pass." The stone behind it folded open into a vertical slit of gray-white light. A way up. Not safe, but a way. The thing did not pursue. It only watched me as I ran. My boots struck stone that grew lighter, thinner, as if the depth itself was losing confidence. The air warmed, the light ahead widened, stretched, and then I was falling again, this time forward, through a curtain of pale dust and shattered memory. I crashed into snow, real snow, cold enough to burn. I rolled onto my back, sucking air that tasted clean and sharp and mercilessly alive. Above me the sky was a hard winter blue, veined with thin clouds like old scars. The hole behind me sealed without a sound. No stone, no mark, only unbroken snow. For a long time, I lay there shaking. Then I heard it. Not underground, not within stone. Above the wind, a distant bell began to ring. Not in warning, not in welcome, in answer.
The chain shifted when I inhaled. Not dragged, answered. The sound was a dry whisper of metal on stone, close enough that my bones vibrated with it. I forced myself not to move, not to give it rhythm. Darkness lay pressed against my eyes, thick but not blind. There was a faint grayness to it, the way deep water holds a suggestion of light. Something breathed on the other end of the chain. Slow, measured, patient. My palm found the sickle by instinct. The handle was colder than the stone, slick with a thin film of frost that had no right to exist this far underground. I tightened my grip anyway. The echo of its edge was still in me. The pit had not taken that. Yet. A faint glow bloomed ahead, no brighter than moonlight strained through bone. It revealed a tunnel carved in uneven arcs, as if the rock had once been soft and remembered being shaped by hands that no longer existed. Symbols crawled over its walls, not etched, but pressed, like scars that had learned how to write.
The chain led forward into that glow. It tightened. A single step pulled me before I meant to take one. My boot scraped against the stone, the sound obscene in the quiet. The breathing on the far end of the chain paused, listened. I froze. The air thickened with attention. Then, one slow pull, not hard, not testing, inviting. I resisted. The chain did not move. Instead, the tunnel moved around me. The wall behind shifted with a low grinding sound as a seam appeared where no seam had been before. Stone peeled open like the turning of a massive, petrified page, revealing another corridor, layered behind the first. Many paths, all wrong. The pull on the chain returned, firmer now. My feet slid despite my will. The stone beneath them had grown slick, as though recently exhaled. I bit back a shout and dug the sickle's point into the floor. It bit deep, sending a tremor up my arms. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the breathing on the chain changed. It drew in more air than any lung should hold. The chain snapped taut. I was wrenched forward so violently the sickle tore free in a spray of sparks. I crashed to my knees and slid across the stone, skinning my palms through the thin leather of my gloves. The tunnel rushed past in blurred gray bands. I slammed into something solid. Not wall, leg. The impact knocked what little breath I had left from my chest. I sprawled onto my back, chest heaving, vision swimming. The faint glow wavered, then steadied. I was not alone. The thing standing over me wore the suggestion of a body. Its shape was wrong in subtle, stomach-turning ways. Too many joints in its limbs, a ribcage that rose and fell like a second, inverted set of lungs beneath the first. Its face was unfinished, not damaged, abandoned. Features drifted across it, as if searching for anchors, eye ridges sliding into new places, a mouth forming and dissolving again with wet, soundless effort. And yet, when it looked at me, it knew me. "You came back wrong," it said. The voice was many voices forced to share one throat. I scrambled backward, my shoulder striking stone. My hand found the sickle by blind luck. I brought it up between us, shaking so badly the blade sang faintly. "I never belonged here," I rasped. The thing tilted its unfinished head. "No one does. That is why we remain." It lifted one elongated hand. The chain slid through its fingers like a living thing. "You cut the deep hunger free. Now the shallow ones multiply. We were sealed to starve. You broke the lock between hungers." I tried to rise. The stone beneath me bowed. Not cracked, yielded. The floor dipped just enough to steal my balance and send me back down hard. Pain flashed white through my spine. "You walk above," the thing continued, stepping closer, its joints folded in ways no living anatomy allowed. Its hand brushed my boot. Cold surged through me so violently my vision tunneled. For an instant, I tasted iron and snow and old wood all at once. My name wavered again at the edges of thought. I drove the sickle downward with everything I had left. The blade sank into its wrist. There was resistance, then release. Black thread sprayed from the wound, whipping away into smoke before they could touch me. The thing hissed like a sound plunged into cold water and recoiled violently. The chain went slack. I rolled to my side and staggered upright, barely keeping my feet. The tunnel had begun to change again. The symbols along the walls writhed, rearranging themselves as if reacting to injury. "You are marked now," the thing said, low and certain. "Even here, even broken, they will hear you pass." The stone behind it folded open into a vertical slit of gray-white light. A way up. Not safe, but a way. The thing did not pursue. It only watched me as I ran. My boots struck stone that grew lighter, thinner, as if the depth itself was losing confidence. The air warmed, the light ahead widened, stretched, and then I was falling again, this time forward, through a curtain of pale dust and shattered memory. I crashed into snow, real snow, cold enough to burn. I rolled onto my back, sucking air that tasted clean and sharp and mercilessly alive. Above me the sky was a hard winter blue, veined with thin clouds like old scars. The hole behind me sealed without a sound. No stone, no mark, only unbroken snow. For a long time, I lay there shaking. Then I heard it. Not underground, not within stone. Above the wind, a distant bell began to ring. Not in warning, not in welcome, in answer.
The bell did not fade. It grew clearer. Each strike arrived a heartbeat apart from the last, slow and deliberate, as if the sound were measuring the distance between me and something patient enough to keep count forever. I pushed myself upright through the snow. My hands were numb, my palms still torn and bleeding beneath the gloves. The sickle lay a few feet away, half buried in white. I crawled to it and closed my fingers around the handle. The metal was warm, not heated, alive with use. The bell rang again. The sound came from the east, from beyond the river, from the direction the riders had taken. The sky dimmed as thin clouds slid over the sun like lids lowering over tired eyes. The snowfield around me stretched empty in every direction, except where the forest rose in crooked black layers to the west. No tracks marked my fall, no sign of the hole that had taken me into the deep. Only the bell remained. I staggered to my feet. The ringing shifted, not louder, closer. I turned slowly, breath tight in my chest. Between the distant trees on the far edge of the field, something moved against the wind. At first, I thought it was a person wrapped in dark cloth, walking badly through snowdrifts. Then it lifted its head, and I saw that it carried the bell not in its hands, but in its chest. A crude iron frame had been riveted around its ribs. The bell hung inside that cage where a heart should beat, swinging with every step it took. The sound did not come from motion alone. The bell rang even when the figure paused, as if something inside it were striking the metal from within. It stopped at the edge of the field. The ringing continued. I raised the sickle. The thing raised its empty hands in perfect imitation. When it spoke, the sound did not come from its mouth.
It came from the bell. You fell where we cannot follow, and returned where you cannot hide. Its body was human-shaped, but stretched slightly too tall, too narrow through the shoulders. Its face hung slack, skin drawn tight over bone, as if it had forgotten how to carry expression. Snow did not settle on it. The flakes curved away at the last moment, bending around a presence they refused to touch. You learned the sound of chains. Now you learn the sound of summoning. I never called you, I said. The bell rang once, slow and heavy. No, you called the door. We heard the echo. It took one step forward. The snow beneath its foot darkened instantly, not melted, thinned like paper soaked in invisible oil. My grip tightened on the sickle. My arms ached from trembling, but I did not lower the blade. Why now? I asked. The question tore out of me before I could stop it. The bell rang twice in quick succession. Because now you choose. It stepped forward again. The snowfield bent subtly toward it, the way tall grass leans when something massive passes through without touching the ground. You broke the great hunger, but you did not break hunger. You taught it movement. You taught it direction. Another step. It was halfway across the field now. The air thickened with the scent of cold iron and old storms. What happens if I refuse? I asked. The bell did not answer immediately. When it did, the sound was softer. Then we will learn without you. That frightened me more than any threat. The bell thing stopped again, close enough now that I could see the fine stitching along its wrists and neck. Whoever had made it had done so with careful hands. And Maud? The bell stuttered. Once. Spent, but not ended. Some echoes fall inward. Some are carried. Hope flared despite every warning carved into my bones. Where? The bell rang once. Where you cannot follow without learning how to listen. The cloud cover thinned abruptly. A shard of pale sunlight broke through and struck the bell in the creature's chest. The metal flared bright, and for an instant I saw shapes moving within it, shadows beating against the inside like trapped wings. The ringing grew louder, not just from the bell, from beneath the snow, from within the forest, from the air itself. Other answers were waking. The bell thing lifted one hand and pointed east, toward the river and the burned skeleton of the church beyond it. You will walk, or you will be walked. I looked past it, toward the cracked ice of the river glinting faintly through the trees, toward the ruins that no longer felt empty. The sickle pulsed once in my hand. Not light, memory. I took one step forward. The bell rang in approval, and far beneath the frozen earth, something vast shifted its chains and turned its attention at last toward the sound I had become.
The bell thing did not lead. It allowed me to walk. Every step I took toward the river, it matched at a measured distance. Never closer than 10 paces, never farther than 20. The bell inside its chest rang in time with my heartbeat now, not synchronized, in conversation. When my pulse faltered, the bell waited. When fear spiked, it answered too quickly, as if amused. The snow thinned as I neared the tree line. Dark water showed through the cracked ice beyond, moving slow and thick, like blood forgetting how to freeze. The ruins of the church leaned against the sky on the far bank, Its remaining wall split down the middle, as if something massive had once pressed its way outward. The ringing beneath the ground faded as I left the field. But it did not stop. It only moved. Now the sound came from the river, from under the ice. I stopped at the bank. The bell thing halted with me. The river was wider than I remembered, or perhaps it had always been this wide, and memory had been the thing that shrank. Black shapes drifted beneath the surface, slow and patient, never quite touching the ice from below. The water bulged in places, as if something larger passed through currents too small for it. "You want me to cross?" I said. The bell rang once. Approval. "There is no bridge," I said. The bell rang again. Indifference. I edged along the bank, searching for shallower water, for something broken enough to risk. The bell thing followed my movement exactly, its steps making no sound, its bell marking every choice I hesitated over. I found the place where the ice had not fully sealed. A narrow channel of open water cut through the frozen surface, steaming faintly in the cold air. The current there was faster, more purposeful, as if it knew where it was going. Something moved beneath it. Large. Slow. Listening. I tested the ice with the sickle's handle. It held for a foot, then another. The open channel lay 5 steps ahead. Behind me, the bell rang. Not urgent, expectant. I stepped onto the ice. It did not crack. The second step held. The third, the ice dipped. Not shattered, bowed. Water lapped over my boot, soaking leather instantly, biting like teeth. I swore and lurched forward, throwing my weight ahead. The 4th step carried me to the edge of the open channel. The 5th, the ice gave way. Cold swallowed my leg up to the thigh. The shock tore the air out of my lungs in a ragged cry. I pitched forward, slamming chest first onto the unbroken ice on the far side. My fingers clawed at the surface, finding no grip, numb already. The shape beneath the water turned. Directly under me, the current slowed. The river listened. Something pressed upward from below, not striking, not breaking, just measuring the thickness between us. The bell rang once. Very soft. I kicked wildly, dragging my submerged leg up and out of the water. Ice scraped skin raw through soaked cloth. I slid forward on my stomach like a drowning animal until my weight was fully on the far side. The dome beneath me sank back into the river without ever breaking the surface. The current resumed. Too normal. I lay there shaking until I could breathe again. When I forced myself upright, the bell thing stood on the opposite bank. The open channel between us widened slightly, as if in acknowledgement of a rule. "You cannot follow yet," I said. The bell chimed once. Not disagreement. Truth. It lifted one hand and placed it against its own chest, against the metal frame, against the bell. "You will hear us," it said, "but you will not see us again until the river forgets your weight." Then it stepped backward. The snow behind it thinned, darkened, opened, not into water, into depth. The bell thing descended as if into invisible stairs, the ground receiving it without resistance. The bell rang with each step down, growing duller, more distant, until at last the sound folded inward and vanished. Silence rushed in to fill the absence, not peace, vacuum. I turned toward the church ruins. The bell had pointed me here for a reason. The church wall loomed higher as I approached, the stone scorched black where fire had once devoured the roof. The doorway was intact,
though the door itself lay split inside like a fallen shield. Snow had drifted into the nave, piling in uneven white mounds between the broken pews. The altar had collapsed. Beneath it, the stone floor had been carved open in a circle wide enough to swallow a wagon. Not shattered, cut. The edges were smooth, intentional. Cold air rose from the opening, carrying with it the same scent I had tasted in the deep: dust, metal, and something old that had never learned the difference between waiting and hunger. I stepped closer. The sickle warmed again in my hand. Not warming, recognition. From below the cut stone, the bell rang once more. Not distant now. Right beneath my feet.
I swallowed hard, forcing myself to steady the sickle in my shaking hands. The hole beneath the altar yawned like a mouth waiting for a story it had already begun to tell. I could feel the air rising from it, not cold, not warm, expectant, carrying a weight that pressed against my lungs as though it measured my readiness for each breath. I knelt at the edge, peering into blackness that was absolute yet alive. A faint glimmer caught the corner of my vision, metallic, almost reflective. The chain, the same one from the depths that had pulled me into darkness. It dangled into the void below, swaying lightly as if someone, or something below, still remembered me. The bell's echo rolled beneath my feet, not ringing, but throbbing, vibrating through the stone as if it were embedded in my bones. My fingers itched for the chain, but caution anchored me. One misstep, and I would descend unprepared. I could feel the cold creeping up from the floor, crawling like living ice along my boots and up my calves. A movement stirred below the altar. The chain twitched, then pulled gently, not violently, not as before, but enough to remind me of what had waited and what had followed me to the surface. My pulse quickened. I swallowed bile, my throat dry, and forced the next thought to focus, prepare before following. The blackness began to take shape. Shadows coalesced into faint outlines. Stone columns, or the semblance of them, rose into the void, forming a fractured, impossible cathedral beneath the earth. Its walls were etched with symbols I could not decipher, but that felt familiar, resonating deep within memory I didn't know I possessed. Each echo of the bell above, each pulse of the chain, aligned with these markings, as if the architecture itself breathed with the rhythm of the thing waiting below. The chain tugged again, harder, insistent, an invitation. I swallowed the terror, set my jaw, and grasped it firmly. Cold metal bit into my hands, biting through snow and frost. The descent began not with a fall, but with a slow, almost ceremonial lowering. My boots scraped stone, echoing softly against surfaces I couldn't see. The deeper I went, the more the air thickened, carrying that metallic scent, the sharp tang of blood long forgotten, the faint decay of centuries. Halfway down, a whisper reached me, not through ears, but through skin. It pressed against my thoughts like water, cold and undulating, pulling at corners of memory. You are here. You are chosen. You are unfinished. The voices spoke in a chorus I couldn't trace to any single source. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't inviting. It simply was. And I had no choice but to listen. The light above dimmed as the tunnel beneath swallowed me. The altar disappeared, and the snow and wind from the surface became distant murmurs, faint and irrelevant. Only the chain and the bell's pulse guided me, the metallic heartbeat synchronizing with the impossible cathedral below. Finally, my boots touched flat stone. The descent ended, but the sense of being suspended did not. Around me, darkness throbbed with life. The air shimmered as if the walls themselves breathed. Shapes moved at the edge of perception, flickers of motion, too quick, too deliberate to be merely shadows. The chain slackened slightly, then tightened, anchoring me in place. And then I saw it. Not the bell thing, not the chain, but them. Figures crouched and waiting in the far corners of the cavernous space. Incomplete, unfinished, limbs ending abruptly, faces shifting with every blink, eyes like mirrors reflecting nothing and everything, all at once. Their attention was fixed on me. Not hunger, not malice, recognition. They knew I belonged here. They had been waiting for the echo of my steps, the rhythm of my pulse, the warmth of my breath. I took a cautious step forward. The floor beneath me pulsed softly with the same heartbeat I had felt through the chain. Every movement I made was measured, observed. Every breath mirrored. I was not the first to enter. I would not be the last. But the feeling, the weight of being watched, weighed and measured, pressed down on me so force that I could barely lift the sickle. A low resonant hum began to grow from the walls themselves. Not sound, not vibration, something older, something waiting to rise. It swelled with each heartbeat, each step, filling the cavern until my ears ached with the pressure of presence. And then the bell rang, once, softly, impossibly from below, through stone and chain, vibrating through me, confirming what I had not yet dared to admit. I had crossed into the world beneath the world, and whatever lay here, beneath centuries and snow, had been waiting for me all along. The chain pulsed, urging. I stepped forward, and it answered.
The hum deepened as my foot settled onto the pulsing stone, not loud, but dense, as if sound itself had weight here. The figures in the corner shifted in response, their malformed silhouettes rippling like reflections in disturbed water. None advanced, none retreated. They only adjusted, fine calibrations, as though they were aligning themselves to me. The chain in my grip tightened, not pulling, grounding. The bell's after vibration still trembled through the floor and into my bones. I took another step. The sickle whispered as its blade brushed the stone, a thin metallic hiss that seemed too loud in this living hush. The nearest figure leaned forward, its face, or what passed for one, smoothed briefly into something almost human before unraveling again, eyes multiplying and then collapsing back into two. "You hear it too," a voice murmured. Not from the walls, not from behind me, from just beside my left ear. I spun, sickle slashing through empty air. Nothing stood there. No body, no shadow, only the warm pressure of breath that did not fog the air. "You don't belong here," I said, though my voice betrayed me with a tremor I could not control. A soft, soundless laugh brushed against my skull. "None of you do, and yet you always come." The hum intensified. The figures began to rise. They moved with a terrible patience, like joints remembering how they once worked. Bones slid against absence, flesh formed in partial suggestions, an arm shaping itself only to fade at the elbow, a rib cage opening and closing without lungs beneath it. As they stood, the space itself seemed to make room for them, stretching in impossible directions. The chain tugged once, a warning or a command. "What are you?" I whispered. The nearest figure took a step. Its foot struck the floor with a hollow, watery sound. Ripples spread outward in circles of pressure that warped the stone. Another followed, then another. They were not rushing. They were converging.
We are the unanswered, the H that rang and were never opened. My heartbeat thundered so loudly I was sure they could hear it. The hum matched it now, perfectly synchronized. The bell beneath the bell, the one embedded in the bones of this place, was awake. I backed away a step. The chain tightened. No more movement backward. The figures halted again, as if restrained by an invisible perimeter. Their faces twitched with shared annoyance, features reshuffling like broken masks. One extended a hand toward me. The fingers were too many, the knuckles bent at wrong places. Not yet, the voice said. You must descend further. There is no further. This is the bottom. A pause, a feeling like something smiling inside my ribs. This is only the threshold. The stone beneath my feet shifted. Not a collapse, not yet. The pulse beneath it grew stronger, swelling like a breath drawn too deep. Hairline fractures spread in slow, deliberate lines, radiating outward from the center of the chamber. A dull red glow began to leak through, faint at first, then stronger, like submerged embers seen through ash. The figures recoiled as one. The voice beside my ear sharpened. Now you understand why they wait. The fracture split wider. Heat rolled upward in a suffocating wave. The air thickened, stinking of iron and old fire. From the widening gaps below, something moved, not rising, but uncoiling, vast and deliberate, its presence felt before its shape could be perceived. The bell rang again. This time it hurt. I screamed as the sound tore through me, blood trickling from my nose, my vision fracturing into overlapping versions of the same impossible chamber. In every one, the cracks widened. In every one, the red glow intensified. In some, the figures were already gone. In others, they were screaming without mouths. The chain yanked hard. My body lurched forward despite me. The sickle slipped from my grasp and clattered across the stone, vanishing into one of the widening splits with a distant, endless echo. I clawed at the chain with both hands as it dragged me toward the center, toward the deepest convergence of cracks, toward the brightest, angriest glow. You rang, the voice whispered, no longer beside my ear, but everywhere at once. The surface of the floor gave way beneath me. Not a drop, a fold. The stone bent inward like wet parchment, wrapping around my legs, my waist, my ribs. I felt pressure, not crushing, but compressing, reshaping my sense of up and down until direction itself lost meaning. The red light swallowed my vision. The hum became a roar. The figure surged forward at last, their restraint shattered. They poured toward me in a tide of unfinished bodies, screaming with borrowed voices, reaching with hands that formed and unformed mid-grasp. The chain burned in my hands, white hot now, searing flesh, yet I clung to it with the last of my strength. Something vast shifted beneath the folding stone, not rising, turning, and whatever it was turning toward me. The folding stone groaned under its own defiance, the cracks widening into a maw of molten darkness that radiated heat and pressure alike. I clawed at the chain, its links now vibrating violently, almost sentient, twisting my wrists painfully as if testing my grip. The bell's chime had mutated into a wail, an endless resonance that burrowed into my skull and rattled my bones. The figures surged, a living tide of fractured flesh and fractured intent. Their arms elongated and twisted, forming grotesque tools, claws and grasping hooks, yet always pulling back, restrained somehow by the presence beneath the stone. I realized then they were tethered to it, controlled, waiting for my threshold to break completely.
The center of the chamber pulsed. A shape began to emerge from the crimson light. A massive coil of darkness, impossibly thick, stretching downward into the unseen depths below. Not a snake, not a rope, not a shadow, but all of these at once. It radiated hunger and calculation, and yet as I stared, I felt the faintest twinge of recognition. Something ancient and patient, observing me, testing me, anticipating me. The chain tugged again, insistent, relentless. My grip burned, flesh tearing under the force, but I did not let go. I had no choice. The figures shrieked, their voices layering into a chorus of pleading and accusation. I realized they were not the threat. They were warnings, sentinels, echoes of those who had failed before me. A single figure broke free from the mass, a woman, half-formed, half-shimmering, her eyes hollow yet full of memory. She stepped forward, gliding over the stone as though it were water, and spoke with a voice like wind through iron. "Do not be afraid. You were meant to reach this far. Many do not." "Reach what?" I gasped, muscles screaming, breath ragged. The coil beneath the stone pulsed violently, sending waves through the floor that buckled and shifted under my feet. The bell thing's voice joined the chorus now, distant, but infinitely clear. "You chose to descend. You chose to wake it." The woman extended her hand. I hesitated. Then I understood. The coil, the bell, the chain, the figures, they were all facets of the same consciousness bound to the deep. She moved closer, and the pulsing beneath the floor slowed, easing the pressure enough for me to focus. "Follow me," she said, "but you will not walk. You will let the fold guide you." Before I could question her, the floor beneath me gave way entirely, not falling, not dropping, but sliding, folding inward like paper bending to a master's touch. The red light enveloped me, heat licking my skin, the chain still searing, but tethering me to the unseen coil. The figures screamed, reaching, begging, warning, but the woman's voice rose above all. "Do not struggle. Let it show you. Let it judge your resolve." I did. The folding stone carried me downward through impossible geometry. Walls twisted sideways, ceilings inverted, gravity bent until up and down were meaningless. The coil beneath me stretched and recoiled, the bell within it sounding a warped, endless tone that resonated in my skull. My lungs burned, my fingers bled from gripping the chain, my mind swam in dizzying layers of light, shadow, and sound. And then the world flattened. I stood, or rather was without standing, on an obsidian plain, black as spilled ink, stretching beyond vision. The red glow from below dimmed into a molten horizon. The coil had stopped. The bell's resonance now throbbed in the air around me, vibrating through space itself. The figures were there, arranged in a circle, kneeling or floating, their forms twisting and reforming. The woman stood at the center, her hollow eyes meeting mine. "She tells you," she said. "She teads to your purpose. You have become one with the folding stone, the folding itself." I clenched my fists. I bled into the chain and whispered to the silence, "I will endure." The figures shivered in acknowledgement. The coil uncoiled in response, slow, deliberate, infinite. The bell rang once, pure, cutting through the madness, and the trial began.
The bell's pure note did not fade. It stretched, thinning into a high, trembling thread that sliced through my thoughts and pinned them in place. The obsidian plain beneath me warmed,
Not with heat alone, but with a slow, deliberate pressure, like a breath being drawn beneath the skin of the world. The woman stepped back into the ring of figures. As she moved, her form began to fracture, her outline dissolving into the same unfinished geometry as the others. Whatever individuality she had possessed was being reclaimed. Whatever mercy she had offered was no longer hers to give. The coil shifted, not toward me, around me. The darkness near the horizon peeled upward in vast, layered arcs, like titanic ribs unfolding from beneath the plane. With each movement, the air thickened, sound distorted. My heartbeat stretched and lagged, as though time itself were being kneaded and reshaped. The chain in my hands slackened slightly, not in release, but in recalibration. A weight pressed against my chest, not physical, judgmental. Images forced their way into my mind, uninvited, merciless. Snow-choked fields, the chapel altar, the first time I heard the bell faint beneath the wind, my hesitation at the threshold, my fear, my curiosity, my decision to descend despite knowing better. The coil's presence tightened. The figures around me began to convulse, their bodies bent backward at impossible angles, mouths opening wide though no sound emerged. Their suffering was not new. It was being replayed, recorded, displayed. The first endurance, the bell voice intoned from everywhere and nowhere, is remembrance without flinching. The images sharpened. I felt it all again. The cold, the dread, the moment the chain first tightened around my wrist in the dark below the altar, the panic, the temptation to let go, the shame of how close I had come to doing exactly that. My knees buckled, though there was no true gravity here. The obsidian plane rose to meet me, firm and unyielding. I did not close my eyes. The pressure increased immediately. More memories followed, not mine alone. I saw others descend. A man in rusted mail screaming as the chain burned through his palms. A girl no older than 15 clutching a prayer token as the figures closed around her. A monk who rang the bell 3 times in defiance before the sound collapsed his lungs from the inside. Their endings were not shown, only their choices. The coil pulsed with approval and condemnation in equal measure. I understood then, this was not spectacle. It was filter. The deep did not want bodies. It wanted bearing. The capacity to witness without breaking was the first gate. My breath came shallow and ragged now. My hand shook violently, blood slicking the chain. My vision blurred at the edges, reality thinning like worn parchment. Still, I did not look away. The bell's tone shifted slightly, not gentler, sharper. The second endurance, the voice said, is pain without surrender. The obsidian beneath me split, not open, apart. A seam of blinding red tore through the plane directly beneath my feet. From it surged heat so intense it stole what little air I had left. The chain went rigid, yanking my arms out to either side, stretching me wide above the glowing fissure. The pain was immediate and total. Not a localized agony, not something that could be categorized. It saturated me completely, passing through skin, muscle, bone, into thought itself. Every nerve screamed in unison, a choir of raw sensation that drowned out even the bell. I screamed. The sound was swallowed instantly. My feet drifted inches above the fissure. The heat licked upward, searing the soles of my boots, blistering through leather, through skin. My shoulders wrenched against the chain until I felt something tear deep within. The figures watched, not passively,
hunger edged their stillness. If I fell, they would surge again. I knew it with absolute certainty. The coil's massive outline shifted higher, tightening the chamber around me. The heat intensified. My vision fractured into red and black layers. My body convulsed on instinct alone. My mind began to fracture next. This is where they break, a small merciful thought whispered. This is where they always let go. My fingers spasmed. The chain ground deeper into torn flesh. I tasted blood and copper and smoke, and still I held. Not from bravery, from something colder. A quiet, terrible refusal. The bell rang once more. The fissure sealed abruptly. The heat vanished. The chain slackened just enough for me to collapse forward onto the obsidian plane, every muscle seizing, lungs dragging in scorched, shaking gasps. The figures shuddered in visible disappointment. The coil retreated a fraction. "The second gate holds," the bell voice said. I lay shaking, unable to rise, my entire body reduced to a single trembling wound. The obsidian beneath me cooled slowly, almost tender in comparison to what had just occurred. I barely managed to lift my head. The woman's shape reformed briefly at the center of the ring. Her eyes were clearer now, almost mournful. "There is only one endurance left," she said softly. I tried to speak. Only a hoarse scrape of sound escaped. She looked at the chain still wrapped around my bleeding hands. She said, "Self, without illusion. That is the one none endure." The coil began to rise again, but this time, no heat followed, only darkness.